The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the second webinar on the reappearance of the Christ. So before we start, let's go for a very quick visualization so that we can invoke the help of DK so that we can really understand what he was trying to say some 80 years ago. So just imagine all of us linking up with each other and raise your consciousness as high in the head as you can. And endeavor then to hold steady, hold the mind in the light. Realize too that on DK's side, he's also standing ready to pour out upon us his love and strength, and endeavoring to lift us up into a much higher state of consciousness. And now visualize ahead of us a disc or a sphere of indigo blue, a deep electric blue light. And imagine him standing in the center of that disc, waiting for our group. Then see a band of golden light between us and the disc, gradually shortening, bringing us closer and closer, slowly and steadily, until we enter into the heart of the blue disc, into the consciousness of Master DK. And now let us sound a blue Om as we link up not only with one another as a group, but with also DK inspiring our group. There was a question from last week that I think it was Yvonne who brought up the question, because she was a bit confused whether Christ was in his dense physical body or etheric body. And at the time, I didn't know either. So I'm going to answer that question because it intrigued me a little bit, and I did a bit more research. And then we will look at Christ's experience in the Garden of Gethsemane, because that was the starting point of the June 1945 experience and his decision. So we'll look at that. Then we will look at the world conditions that Christ will be facing as he reappears, and why are they so unique to him. And then in the meantime, there are three important events that have occurred since June 1945. So we'll be looking at these ones as well. Then we will look at the nature of Christ's work in its three aspects. So first of all, the question whether he was in his dense physical body or etheric. To cut a long story short, it's most likely in his etheric body, because one paragraph after the one that I quoted you, where DK said, Christ has never left us, but in physical body and securely concealed, though not hidden. So we were confused between physical, dense physical or etheric, but the next paragraph gives us the answer. It is a spiritual fact that those who have passed from the cave of the tomb, in other words, they have died and then resurrected on the other side, life can be seen and at the same time evade the vision of the believer. So the departed soul has then has withdrawn his life force from the physical and is now in his etheric body. So it can be seen by those who can see etherically, but the dense physical body is decomposing. And the other proof that we have is a little bit further on page 46. Again, DK mentions it is the physical presence upon our planet of such figures such as the Lord of the World, which is Sanat Kumara. And we all know that Sanat Kumara is not in his dense physical body because he is so pure, his energy is so powerful that he cannot possibly take a dense physical body. But he does exist in his etheric body on the 4 higher subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. Then the 7 spirits before the throne, same thing. The Buddha is also in his etheric. The Christ, then the spiritual leader. All these people are then in their etheric body. So this question we can now put it to rest. And let's have a look at Christ's experience in Gethsemane and how important this experience is. Christ evoked the Shambhala force 3 times. Once in the temple of Jerusalem as a child, then in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then the last time was in June 1945 when he decided to reappear. But actually, these 3 evocations are like a single event for the Christ. As he was kneeling beside the rock, he experienced a huge crisis because he was torn between what he thought was best as initiate for the world, as the leader, and the will of Sanat Kumara, or the Logos. So finally, he was so torn that in despair and in agony, he says, all right then, let it be your will and not mine. And the moment he surrendered to the will of the Lord of the world, he had a huge expansion of consciousness. The light of revelation just descended on him as he raised his eyes upward towards that light. And he just knew at that moment what he had to do. And what happened in these crucial moments? He fused his will with that of the Logos. He anchored and established Sanat Kumara's will, or the Logoic will, on earth, and therefore made it possible for intelligent humanity to carry it out. And at that moment, Christ had the vision of what the Logos had in mind for not only humanity, but through humanity for the whole planet. And at that moment, the plan, the goal, the techniques, its methods the laws and their application, the effects, the difficulties that were to be met, and the energy of love that he had to employ, and the close and growing relation and interplay between hierarchy and humanity suddenly was revealed to him. He fully understood all of that. His destiny then was to anchor the will, the spirit of the Logos right down here on earth. And so he anchored a tenuous thread, which DK tells us that even after 2,000 years is still a thin, frail line of connecting energy. So what really Christ did, he established the planetary Antakarana. He brought the energy of Shambhala right down on earth to humanity, allowing therefore men or aspirants to move upwards to hierarchy, and those from hierarchy then to Shambhala. And therefore he had that continuous line from Shambhala through hierarchy right down to humanity. And to the true meaning of the word carpenter, this decision that he made in the Garden of Gethsemane was to build in Aquarius and to complete the task that he started to do. Which means that him and his disciples, and together with a new group of world servers, we will be the pledged builders of this new civilization, the new house of humanity. And him, Christ the carpenter, the builder of that new civilization. Now, because of this decision, his consciousness became extraplanetary, as Sanat Kumara's consciousness, as if their minds melded. He could consequently touch certain heights of consciousness or awareness and contact certain solar agencies that had never been contacted by men before. He established for the very first time in planetary history contact with an extraplanetary being called the Spirit of Peace. And he established for the very first time in planetary history the contact between hierarchy, humanity, Shambhala, and the Spirit of Peace. Therefore, bringing the energy of the Spirit of Peace right down to humanity, so that then the will of God can continue to be distributed. And so he became the light of the world and the Prince of Peace. So that today, because of what Christ did in that very humble garden, humanity now can add its efforts to the working of the plan of the Logos. So what he did is he brought the will to good from the Father's house, from Shambhala, so that it can be transformed through hierarchy, through the kingdom of souls, to become the goodwill of the kingdom of God and be transformed into right human relations by intelligent humanity. And so as a consequence of that fusion of Christ's will with logoic will, he opened the door for the very first time to humanity, to the third initiation. He anchored on earth the will of God in a matrix of love, and he pointed the way through the needle's eye, which gave entrance through the pyramid, which means the spiritual triad, and which led out to the 7 pathways that terminates in Shambhala for the masters. So not only through the planetary Antekarana did he bring humanity closer to hierarchy, but he also brought hierarchy closer to Shambhala. So that Gethsemane experience was really a precursor to Christ's decision in 1945. And there, during these 9 years of his crisis, he knew that he had to reappear on earth in visible presence, no longer in his etheric body, but in plain sight for everybody to see. He had to preside over the materialization of the kingdom of souls on earth, establish that kingdom so that that kingdom can come. He had to reinstitute the mysteries of initiation in such a way that they will become then the basis of the new world religion which he wanted to inaugurate. But above all, he needed to reveal the nature of the logoic will, the will of the Father. So once this decision was taken, what sort of conditions that were present and that were totally unique, that no other savior or avatar had ever faced before. And then 3 events occurred within the past century, again that have never occurred as a result of his decision, not only in 1945, but also what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's have a look at these unique conditions that he's facing today. So he knew that his reappearance and his work couldn't be confined to a small locality or a little region totally unheard of the whole world, as it was 2,000 years ago. Then, because of the new technology that have been invented, he knew that radio, press, dissemination of news would make his coming very different to any previous savior. Through television, his face would be made familiar to everybody, and truly every eye shall see him. And so today we can add to radio, press, and television, we can add satellite, mobile phones, internet, and God knows what else there'll be coming up in the next couple of years. But all these conditions are totally new. Swift modes of transportation will also make him available to millions. Boat, rail, plane, they can reach him. Again, no savior has ever faced these conditions before. Secondly, man has become far, far more sensitive than they've ever been. Again, in planetary history, man is more educated, he's more inquiring, he's more intuitive, he's more tolerant and of the unusual, of the unique than any other time in history. Man's intellectual perception, more acute sense of values, a keener ability to discriminate, a sharper ability to discriminate and to choose is developing really fast. And therefore, acceptance or rejection of Christ will be quicker and far more general than, again, ever before. Thirdly, there has been a beneficial swing away from churchianity, from Orthodox religion and their grip on people through fear. And that presents a unique opportunity for the restoration of the true values, of the true import of what religion was meant to be doing to people, leading their spiritual life, leading them into a more expansive and truer values. So that is a plus for the Christ. Number 4, churches have familiarized the public with the phrase, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of souls. Esotericists and PHP everywhere have publicized the fact of hierarchy. Spiritualists have testified to the existence of an inner spiritual world. So humanity has a much greater, not only understanding, but also acceptance of an inner spiritual world, therefore creating a unique preparedness that will present Christ with unique opportunities, but also unique problems. 5, the revival of the Eastern religions such as the Buddha and penetrating these concepts, the concepts of karma, the concepts of reincarnation into the Western countries. The Buddhism with their Noble Eightfold Path, their relations to God and relations to our fellow human beings. That Eightfold Path has made a lot of headway in our Western mind. And on this foundation, Christ will build his superstructure of the brotherhood of men for the right human relations being an expression of the love of God. They will constitute man's next demonstration of divinity. Because the Buddha was the embodier of light, and there is a lot of emphasis on light, not only physical light, but also spiritual light in the world today. And lastly, there are groups everywhere working for human welfare, which is again a very new phenomenon in the world. There are clubs, forums, committees, conferences everywhere being formed as never before. And their main reason is to help humanity in some form or another. And this phenomenon, DK tells us, is one of the strongest indications that Christ is on his way. He is preparing men's minds for his eventual reappearance. So what are these 3 events that are immense importance since 1945? Firstly, the spirit of peace, which We said earlier on, Christ made contact with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. But this time, at the June 1945 full moon, the Spirit of peace descended upon Christ. Christ became the embodier of the energy of Christ consciousness, which we will see in a minute what it's all about, and therefore entered into a much closer relation to humanity. And thirdly, which is an event of supreme and planetary importance, is that as a result of Christ's decision to reappear and his fusion with, and his deeper fusion with the will of the Logos, the avatar of synthesis has become, therefore, his closest associate. So let's have a look at one event at a time. The Spirit of peace descending upon Christ. He established for the very first time in planetary history a contact between hierarchy, humanity, Shambhala, and the Spirit of peace in his own place. In his three responses to Shambhala, if you remember, in the Temple of Jerusalem, in the Garden of Gethsemane, and in the June, in the crisis, the 9th year of crisis, culminating in his decision in 1945. So who is the Spirit of peace? He is an extraplanetary being of terrific cosmic potency. Not planetary, cosmic. He brings the cosmic energy of love. He overshadows the Christ very much like Christ overshadowed Master Jesus in Palestine. In other words, Christ will serve or serves as a channel for his directed potency, because his energy, just like Sanat Kumara, is so potent that he cannot possibly take a dense physical body. So therefore, Christ needs to be served or to serve as his channel. His work will demonstrate fully when the Christ will come again, and turmoil and emotional disturbance, mental imbalance will be balanced, because he is called the Spirit of equilibrium after all. So his presence or his work through Christ's physical body will be balanced. He will be balancing all this turmoil with a corresponding cycle of calm, emotional quiet, and mental poise, therefore releasing humanity into a new phase of freedom. And hate will then be balanced by an expressed goodwill and right human relations. So he is destined to bring peace eventually upon earth through the expression of goodwill, which will bring that era of right human relations. Christ became the embodier of the energy of Christ consciousness. What is this Christ consciousness? It's that energy of Christ going straight to the heart of people. He's the custodian of that special Christ consciousness. And because of this energy of the heart, he can, because of that, stimulate the corresponding factor in the hearts of men. enabling therefore men to recognize him, to know him for who and what he is when he reappears. So it's a living bridge between the human kingdom and the kingdom of souls. And the nature of that energy is that it is responsible for the trend towards betterment, everywhere to be sensed, for the growth of the principle of sharing from that goodness in men's heart and thinking today. It's that energy which breaks down the barriers of separation and blend the consciousness of all people into that unity, the communion of saints, as the Christian churches talk about. So that Christ consciousness is inherent in the energy of the heart. And this is what Christ embodies. And the third event is the avatar of synthesis, who became Christ's closest associate. So again, who is he? Again, he's not a planetary avatar, but he's a cosmic avatar. In other words, he's an extraplanetary being who comes from outside the solar system. And he has attained spiritual unfoldment way beyond our solar system. He comes therefore to yield and apply the first ray energy of will. And he can only be reached by focused, intensive thought. In other words, only groups can reach him. Again, because his energy is so powerful. And hence, this is the purpose of the new great invocation that DK gave us. Because of all of us saying that great invocation, then we can invoke the presence of that avatar even more, bringing it right down to the physical plane. And ever since June 1945, when Christ pronounced the great invocation, the avatar of synthesis has become closer to Christ. We are told that he will fortify Christ, he will keep his eye upon him, his hand beneath him, and his heart in unison with his. He works under the great natural law of synthesis, producing at one-ment, unification, and fusion. And his function, in unison with the energy of Christ, is to generate, therefore, spiritual will, the will to good in humanity. And for the masses is goodwill. He helps and supports the Christ under Sanat Kumara's instructions. And his relationship and his planned help dates from the moment Christ pronounced the great invocation and its use by men everywhere. So this great invocation has tremendous impact and potency on humanity. And so DK tells us that this is an event of supreme planetary importance. Why is that? Because the avatar of synthesis is closely related to the will aspect of divinity. And as I mentioned earlier on, Christ realized that he had to come this time to reveal the nature of the will of the Logos. And Christ himself is preparing himself to embody that quality of will. As he's facing a very important initiation, he is preparing to synthesize these three qualities of the divine aspects of light, third aspect, love, second aspect, and will, first aspect. And the avatar of synthesis has a very close relationship to the new group of world servers, because they are a group, so he can work through us as well. So this new group of world servers is very uniquely related to the avatar of synthesis. Therefore, our work, therefore, can be intensified through the association of Christ and him. And this is why he has associated himself with the Christ, working with hierarchy. And now let's look a little bit more closely at the nature of Christ's work. And as we said earlier on, his work is primarily to embody will. In the past, he has embodied love, and he has fused love and light together. But now, it's the will of God that he has to embody. And this is what Christ is preparing himself for. Being supported by the avatar of synthesis, his brother Buddha, and the spirit of peace, in the center of this triangle, the Christ, in June 1945, he took his stand. And from that moment on, his Aquarian work began, and it will continue for the next 2,500 years. And there, he inaugurated a new era, and on the spiritual planes, the new world religion began to take form. And at his reappearance, he is going to inaugurate, to establish that new world religion and synthesize the three aspects and reveal the nature of the will of God, because will be the theme of the coming new world religion. Another of his major tasks was to establish right human relations. That man is far more intellectually developed than at any other time in planetary history presents him with difficulties, because now it's not just the hearts of men that he has to appeal to, but he also has got to reach their intellect. If the will of God is to be intelligently carried out on earth. So therefore, one of his major tasks is to establish right human relations in every department of human living. He needs to restore men's faith in love, because religions have not been successful in their aim. But he will not restore any ancient religions, including Christianity. But he will come to restore men's faith in not only the Father's love, but in the livingness of the Christ. And we will see this a little bit later on. The livingness, remember this word. And also in the very close and subjective, unbreakable relationship of all men. He will establish that we are all souls. And therefore we are made of the same stuff. Group unity, selflessness, love, joy, all of these qualities we all share as a group. So he will come to stimulate group consciousness as he's the embodiment of freedom, the messenger of liberation. He will stimulate the group spirit in people. And we can see this already, that we've seen earlier on how groups everywhere are being formed for human welfare. His spiritual energy will bind men together for the common good. Irrespective of religion, nationality, he will stimulate the good in the heart of people, in everyone. He will stimulate people's consciousness as they prepare for initiation. And as you know, initiation is another word for an expansion of consciousness. So we will develop this point a little bit fuller in the next couple of slides. But he will prepare men's consciousness, not only for first, but also for the second initiation, the third and the fourth. So, in other words, he will nourish their spiritual awareness and their spiritual life. And to do that, he will have to shift his emphasis to the world of education. And secondly, in affairs of government, statesmanship, politics and legislation. And he will no longer focus on churches or philosophy. But this time, his emphasis will be education and politics. Hierarchy realized that education of the public in government affairs is absolutely crucial. So, before true democracy can come into being, men must be educated in cooperative statesmanship, in right sharing. At the moment, we have this trade war going on. So that needs to be sorted out. Clean political interplay is absolutely necessary. No more lies. So the news satellite are bringing to the surface all the lies of politicians everywhere, and the whole world can witness that at the drop of a hat. So we are being educated at how we should be behaving. And I think hierarchy is allowing many things to happen in the field of politics to show us what shouldn't be, so that then we can direct our attention to what should be occurring instead. He will come and establish the new world religion. The fundamentals of faith will remain, and that's on the basis that he will use to build his world religion. And what is that world religion? What is that real church of Christ that he is building? It's the aggregation of all who love their fellow men. He will bring the truer values to light, because to love one's fellow man is a divine faculty, and that's what makes us a member of Church Christ, of the Church of Christ. He is a world teacher, but he will not be just a Christian teacher. He will bring love back to the table. And now let's have a look at certain aspects of his work. And let's have a look at them one at a time. As forerunner of the Aquarian age, the major effect of the Aquarian age is brotherhood, universality, principle of sharing and cooperation. And as you know, Aquarius is all about us, compared to its polar opposite, Leo, which is all about me and I. Jupiter is the soul ruler. Jupiter is the planet of fusion and of love and unity, Ray 2. So this influence, and of course Uranus being the exoteric ruler of Aquarius, bringing this sense of group unity, doing things in group for the common good. So it's that inflow of that Aquarian energy of Ray 7 and Ray 2, which is through Jupiter and Uranus. I need to be more precise here. That will enable the Christ, therefore, to complete his task as world savior and teacher. So on the June 1945, he took over his responsibilities as teacher and leader of the Aquarian age, the forerunner. And DK tells us, when you have the combination of Uranus and Ray 7, these two coming together then precipitates a crisis of initiation, a great rhythmic awakening. And so this is where the world stands today. We have Uranus, the exoteric ruler of Aquarius, and we have the cycle of Ray 7 coming through since 1675. So the world, or rather humanity, is ready to go through the fires of initiation. And this is what Christ will be coming to do. Present humanity for initiation. DK tells us that men on a large scale, in mass formation, will go through that experience of the birth. And what does that mean? How will men experience that? How he'll experience the first initiation is that he will become aware of great changes in his attitude, not only to himself, but to his fellow man, to circumstances, and to his interpretation of life events. He will start seeing things or life with new eyes, with a new perspective. So therefore we can see how important is that opportunity confronting humanity today, as vast numbers will take their very first step. And as you know, the first initiation is the awakening of the heart center. And therefore will go through their very first initiation. Hence, the kingdom of souls will be established in the world as the heart center of humanity will start awakening. So therefore, we see why Christ must come at this time, because he is the one who administers the first and the second initiation. These two initiations will be inaugurated, will be established by the Christ. In the Aquarian age, Christ will be known as the point within the triangle, the dispenser of the water of life, and the nourisher of the little ones. Let's see what each one really means. As the point in the triangle, as we mentioned earlier, flanked by the avatar of synthesis, the Buddha, and the spirit of peace. And within that triangle of influence, these three will use Christ as their outlet. And with him being the middle point, he will influence, he will enlighten, and he will produce right relations in masses of men, not just one individual here and there, but masses. So he will transmit energies from these 3 points. So again, now we see the 3 stanzas, or the 4 stanzas really, of the Great Invocation, how significant they are. The distribution of light, love, and power, and being brought down right here on earth. 2, Christ will be the dispenser of the water of life. If hierarchy is the heart chakra of our logos, represented here symbolically as a lotus, then the Christ is the jewel in that lotus. And as you know, the life aspect flows through the jewel, and only through the jewel. So in the Aquarian age, the risen Christ is himself that water carrier, the dispenser, because he will appear as the supreme head of hierarchy, the core, the heart, the jewel of hierarchy. And from that point, he will meet and dispense life aspect to thirsty nations, thirsty for truth, thirsty for right human relations, and for loving understanding. He will assume the dispenser of water of life. But what does that mean? There are three aspects of the life aspect, or three ways that it expresses itself: as physical life, as livingness, and as life more abundantly. And if you remember 2,000 years ago, Christ did say, I am come that they may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly. What did he mean by that? First of all, as a dispenser of the water of life, as physical life, it means that Christ's presence will nourish the life aspect through the distribution of the life aspect. He will touch the core of every atom of substance, because the jewel, the center of every atom, is that point of living light. The sutratma, that point within each atom, flows through that point. That's how Christ will nourish as physical life. He will bring physical life. As livingness now, it will be seen as light and love within the heart. He will stimulate men's hearts so much. He will nourish their spiritual life that every unit therefore will become part of the spiritual hierarchy, because he will inaugurate the kingdom of souls on earth by stimulating the heart center of each of us. Life more abundantly, this life is known as light, love, and power within and above the head of the disciple of Christ. Therefore, he will nourish not only the heart of the masses, but he will nourish the head chakra of higher initiates, enabling the disciple of the Christ to cooperate much better with hierarchy, humanity, but also with Shambhala. Christ will be the nourisher of the little ones. What does that mean? As we said earlier on, he will prepare men's consciousness to undergo that great expansion of consciousness called initiation. The first initiation, the birth of Christ consciousness within the heart. So he will present masses of people, prepare them for the first initiation. For aspirants, he will prepare them for the second initiation, which is the control of the astral body. The masses, he will prepare them for the control of their physical urges. But he will also prepare advanced humanity and disciples. Prepare them, enable them to take and the fourth initiation, and therefore join his army to become agents of the will of God. So the work of Christ during the Piscean age was to relate humanity to hierarchy. But as the forerunner of the Aquarian age, his work will be to relate humanity to Shambhala, as he will come to reveal the will of the Logos to us. And therefore, he will link even closer humanity, hierarchy, and Shambhala, power, light, and love. And therefore we see the significance of the 3 stanzas of the great invocation, linking the 3 divine centers of Shambhala, where the will of God is known, humanity from the point of light within the mind of God, and hierarchy from the point of love within the heart of God. And in the synthetic line, let light and love and power restore the plan on earth, bringing these 3 planetary centers, in other words, the head chakra of the planetary head chakra of Sanat Kumara, his heart center hierarchy, and his throat center as humanity. These 3 will start working together in a much, much closer relationship. Christ will release energy. But what kind of energy will he be releasing? We know that at the Aries full moon 1945, he has released the forces of restoration and allowed the spirit of resurrection, the extraplanetary being, to release these forces. At the Taurus full moon, Sanat Kumara working through the Buddha, releasing the forces of enlightenment. And at the June full moon, he released the forces of reconstruction, the first aspect of will. So the forces of enlightenment coming from the heart of God, therefore reaching and strengthening all those who love and serve their fellow men. The forces of restoration emanating from the mind of God are connected with a 3rd intelligent principle of the divine nature. And in June 1945, Christ set in motion the forces of reconstruction, effective only in relation to nations and related to the first will of divinity. But we are told that they, the forces of reconstruction, are still the least powerful of these 3 streams of energy released during these 3 full moons in 1945. But it's there. It may not be as effective because man hasn't yet combined love and intelligence together. In other words, hasn't managed to love intelligently yet for these forces of reconstruction to be in full swing. But it will happen. And Christ will be the unifier of East and West. What does that mean? Christ will work in closest relation with the Buddha until this fusion and reconstruction has completely taken place. The Buddha has not relinquished his contact and relation with humanity yet because he needs to do certain work connected with the Christ and with his reappearance and with certain plans of the coming civilization of the Aquarian age. And because, as you know, the Buddha is the intermediary between Shambhala and humanity. So the Aquarian age is crucial as far as the will of the Logos being distributed and being established on earth. So the Buddha has not quite finished his work just yet. So yeah, so as you know, he's at Wesak, we celebrate his, in his etheric body, he comes and releases energies into the planetary etheric body, being the intermediary, linking Shambhala and humanity. But DK tells us that Christ is being trained, or is training himself to release the Buddha of his duties. So he's subjecting himself to a unique process of training to release the Buddha from relating Shambhala to humanity. As now Christ is fusing love and will, Atma and Buddhi, together as one. Because Christ comes for the whole world, not just to the Western world of Christians. He comes to the East and to the West, and he saw that. He saw the planetary catastrophes, the phenomenal disasters and despairs, and the invocation arising from humanity as a whole, from East and West, not just from the Christian world. And so thus, in conclusion, the Christ, with the fused energies of love and wisdom, with the aid of the avatar of synthesis and the Buddha, and under the influence and guidance of the spirit of peace and of equilibrium, then can implement and direct and distribute the energies which will build the new civilization, and therefore usher the sixth root race, bringing Buddhi into the world. And so that concludes today's presentation. But next time, in our third webinar, we will be looking at what Christ will be teaching. He'll be teaching human relations, the law of rebirth, initiation, and the dispelling of glamour. And of course, the establishment of the new world religion. And we will see that's all about on the 19th of August at 8 p.m. GMT. We are running a few minutes late, but I'm sure that we can spare a few more minutes. If you do have anything to share, comments, whatever you would like to share with all of us, go ahead. Put your hand up and Joe will monitor.
I will facilitate. Thank you, Nicole. Another wonderful webinar. I did put in the chat box a way for you to contact us for the recording links. And I see a comment that someone was unable to download the PDF file. So Robert, would you please put your email in the chat box, and I will send you the link. We have been in the process of creating a new entry point for Makara, so we haven't been able to put anything in the we haven't put these webinars yet in Makara. I will be working on that this week, and eventually we'll have a link up. So please let me know. Yoka, I see you also will need to have those sent. I've sent them out for the first webinar to everyone, and everyone I have on that list, I will send the second ones as well. So are there any questions for Nicole? You can either type it in the questions box or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Sheldon, just a second, Sheldon. I will unmute you. Go ahead, Sheldon. You're self-muted. There you go.
See if I mute
you
myself.
go.
Thank you, Nicole. This was just superb. It's the most complete presentation I've ever seen, and the slides are remarkable. So
Thank
bravo, bravo. This is just superb. And at some point, may want to contact you about using this in another way for another group that could, well, stand this. Marvelous composite presentation. Beautifully done. Beautifully done.
Thank you.
Yes, it's so good that there really aren't any questions in some ways.
Well, there's so much to take in. And in 1 hour, we've got to basically condense it so much that we don't have time to expand. So I can understand that, when you're confronted with too much information, you just get bamboozled. You don't know where you are. But it pays to go over the slides again in the quietness of your own environment, with your mind rested. Go through all the quotes. It's well worth going through these. And sometimes if something intrigues you in the quotes, if you are able to read either the book or to get them online, I know that Lucis Trust has got the 24 books online. If you don't have any of the books that have been quoted today, it's well worth reading before and after. As I said to you, I missed this very first one, and thank you, Yvonne, for bringing up this issue of etheric and dense body. And it's only once I kept on rereading that that paragraph that I saw, I thought, oh my God, how come I didn't see this before?
Yvonne's
there it was
hand
in
is,
plain sight.
Yvonne's hand is up. I tried to
Okay.
unmute you, Yvonne. There's a little bit of static, but I'll do so again. So go ahead, Yvonne.
Okay, Nicole, I don't mean to drive you nuts, but I have another question.
Yeah, go for it. I love it.
Okay, I had heard that Buddha left his vestments or bought some type of vestments for Christ to use when
Yes.
he returned. Now, could you shed some light under this, where that comes from and what that means?
Yeah. You know how when we die, the three permanent atoms are like the storage of the experiences, the richness of the experience, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, right? So these are the storage that occur after we die. But there are also permanent atoms on realms. Permanent atom, Buddhic permanent atom, the permanent atom. What is the Buddha or the Christ is to help him, is the result of his experiences. This is what that really means, the vestures. So it's all the experiences. He's going to, it's, if I can use an analogy here, if you leave, you want somebody to be better at something. You say, hey, there's the notes that I've made on this particular skill that helped me master that skill. Here's my notebook. Use it. So in a way, this is what the Buddha is doing to the Christ. And say, hey, here are my experiences. It's yours. That's basically what that means.
Thank you so much.
Actually, I had that slide in, but when I timed myself, I could see that there wasn't much time, so I had to remove that slide.
Okay.
So
thank you
so I'm glad that you brought it up.
Yeah, that was bothering me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Nicole, I don't see any more hands except those raised in thank you and gratitude for the comprehensiveness. And thank you all for your comments to Nicole. It's always good to have a little encouragement. So in the links you'll receive the video recording, you'll receive an audio of the recording, and you will receive a link to the slides. And then, as I said, in a couple of weeks, these will be up on Makara, and I will send out that link to all of you before the August, our final webinar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you, Joe, for being our technical expert behind the scene, making sure that everything flows and everything happens. And thank you, everyone, for joining in today and contribution, and for your contribution to this webinar. So have a good month, and may the energy of Sirius be with you. May the force be with you during the whole month.
We have just passed the Leo ingress, so we're entering into Leo now.
And it's very important.
Many more thank yous.
Yes.
And people for the comprehensiveness. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.